Thanks to everyone for taking the time this evening. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Irene Lane. I'm the Vice Mayor. And on behalf of the Town Council this evening, we're very, very excited to receive this update from both EYA and the county. Just to go over the agenda for this evening, we'll start out with Deedon Ingram, who is one of our fantastic Town Committee chairs, who not only is the chair for the Long Range Planning Committee, but this year also the Land Use Committee. Deedon will spend a few minutes providing some context and perspective on the Bethesda Downtown Plan, resident meetings, and the design density discussions that have happened on this project, all prior to the start of the pandemic. We'll then be joined by McLean Quinn, who's the president of EYA, and Karen Garfield, who's the vice president of multifamily development at EYA, who will represent the design for the space, as well as Mr. Chris Conklin, who is the director of the county's Department of Transportation. Mr. Conklin will talk or discuss the county's commitment to this project, plans for determining the amount of parking in the garage, and the overall budget and funding for this project. After all these presentations, we'll open up the chat box so that everyone can ask their questions. And finally, we'll hear a few closing statements from Mayor Rush. A couple of housekeeping items. We're recording tonight's session, as you can see. And second, you're welcome to submit your questions, and our town manager through the chat box, and our town manager, Todd Hoffman, will essentially categorize them and pose those questions to either McLean, Karen, Chris, or even us as town council members accordingly. So without further delay, let's turn it over to Deedon.
Irene, just one thing. I think people should feel free to ask their questions as they form them. They don't have to wait until the Q&A period, because
understood.
We'll stack them up. So
that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to give you a little background on the project and on the Bethesda Downtown Plan, and I'd like to start by orienting you to the four properties that are part of this project. The first one is 7121 Wisconsin Avenue, which is the property that the Bernstein Company owns, and it is located between the Farm Women's Market and the Black Glass Building on the corner of Leland and Wisconsin. The second property is the Farm Women's Market itself. The third property is the large county parking lot known as Lot 24 that's located between Willow and Leland behind the Farm Women's Market. And the fourth property is the smaller county parking lot, Lot 10, located between Leland and Walsh Street behind the Tudor shops on that block of Wisconsin. Under the Bethesda Downtown Plan, 7121 Wisconsin was rezoned for a height of 150 feet, with an additional 25 feet of height if they redevelop the Farm Women's Market site. The Farm Women's Market site was slated to become a civic green. The market building would stay, of course, because it's a historic building. Lots 10 and 24 were rezoned for development up to 90 feet high, with an additional 20 feet possible if the development had enough moderately priced dwelling units in it. Originally, the county for the planning proposed just a narrow green strip along 46th Street to separate the town from any development that might occur on lots 10 and 24. The town and Bethesda communities fought hard to get language into the plan that called for parks on both lots 10 and 24, and were successful to get language that says parks to the maximum extent possible on those two sites. We won that fight because we got more than 6,000 signatures on a petition, which persuaded the county council to add the language to the plan. The town and other communities fought for these parks because we recognize the need for more park space in Bethesda in general, and especially with the many tall buildings that would be built and the thousands of new residents that would be moving in. Lots 10 and 24 stood out as prime real estate for new parks for several reasons. First, lots 10 and 24 comprise about 3 acres, which is more open space than available anywhere else in Bethesda, and the county owns them. Second, the aggregation of parks on lots 10 and 24, together with Elm Street Park and the Civic Green on the Farm Women's Market, will result in a substantial park space, which allows amenities not now available in Elm Street Park or anywhere else in Bethesda. We will all enjoy and benefit from these amenities and from having such an expansive green space. Third, inclusion of lot 24 as a green space in combination with the civic green on the Farm Women's Market site allows expansion of the food and shopping things that would be brought to that site. And finally, conversion of parking lots 10 and 24 directly benefits the town because they will form a substantial green transition zone between Bethesda and the town. The Bernstein Company's initial development proposal did not include lots 10 and 24. The proposal only included construction of a 175-foot building on their 7121 Wisconsin property and redevelopment of the Farm Women's Market site. The town urged Bernstein to expand their vision to include some development on the parking lots and creation of parks on the remaining surface area of those parking lots. Bernstein was willing and brought EYA in as a partner for the larger project. In designing the project, they understood that the county had no funds to contribute, and therefore they would need to pay for undergrounding all of the parking spaces from lots 10 and 24. To cover this substantial cost, the initial design proposed in the summer of 2018 included large buildings spanning lot 24 from Leland all the way to Willow, and townhouses on lot 10. The town, the surrounding communities, and newly elected county executive Mark Elrick all believed strongly that the amount of land left for parks under the proposed design was insufficient. The developers listened to our concerns, and over the next 15 months, working through a number of iterations, they arrived at a design that very materially increased the amount of park space on lot 10 and lot 24. This revised plan was presented at a town forum in September of 2019 and was met with broad approval by our residents. It was then approved as a sketch plan by the planning board in October of 2019. This is still the design that Bernstein EYA are proposing and that McLean Quinn will present to us this evening, as it's now been 2 years since we all saw that plan. As we worked collectively to have the size of the buildings reduced and the size of the parks increased, we realized that there was an unavoidable consequence, namely that the contribution from the developers would decrease commensurate with their building a smaller residential project. The town therefore advocated that the Bethesda parking lot district, which is a legally distinct entity, issue bonds to support the project. We met many times with the county and with the developers to discuss this option and believed that it was under active consideration. Regrettably, we recently were told that this is not an option at this time, as Mr. Conklin will explain tonight. This puts pressure on other potential sources of public funding to pay for the expansion of green space that was included in the current plan. So that's the background, and I will turn it over to McLean Quinn and EYA to continue with their presentation of the plans.
Deedon, thank you very much. And Irene and Barney, thank you very much for having us back. Again, my name is McLean Quinn with EYA. I know many of you have had the opportunity to learn about this project over the years, and I will just start by saying that we are incredibly excited to be back here now. My colleague Karen's going to walk through the details of the sketch plan that we submitted and the vision for the parks on lot 24 and lot 10, and the vision for the redeveloped, revitalized, and sustained Farm Women's Market building and use on the property. However, I just wanted to take a moment and say that this process has been a long time coming. We're thrilled to be here sort of at the start again, where we can actually begin to plan these parks in detail. Where we can launch into a public engagement process with the folks on this call, with the residents of Bethesda, with the planning department, with the Historic Preservation Commission, and with all the stakeholders who have a very, very important say in this new destination park for the town of Chevy Chase and downtown Bethesda. And so we're thrilled to be here. Our company is located just about 2 blocks from the site in downtown Bethesda. We've been urban infill residential developers in the DC region for about 30 years. And we really specialize in public-private partnerships and complex projects like this. We have a long-term relationship with Bernstein Management, and Chuck Hathaway is here from Bernstein to share a little bit about his organization too. But we're thrilled to be here now, restarting this process, envisioning this really what I think can be a spectacular park for the community, and a tremendous transformation of surface parking lots into a true community amenity. So thank you all for having us. I will be here to answer questions later, but I'm going to hand it over to Chuck and then to Karen now.
Thank you all. I'm representing Bernstein Management Corporation, which is not related to the Bernstein companies that some people confuse us with, who's the developer of the Marriott. This is the management company, Bernstein Management Corporation, our holding company. We own about 90 properties in the Washington, D.C. and Virginia area. We've owned this property since 1965. We also own the Farm Women's Market at this point. We're very excited to have a public-private partnership here where we can develop something that will be a treasure for Bethesda for years to come. And having been born down the street at the Bethesda Naval Hospital many years ago, have seen a lot of changes. I'm very excited to have not only a new development, but also a nice park that people of all ages and sizes and backgrounds can enjoy. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm Karen Garfield. I actually joined EYA about 3 months ago, and really just to emphasize the company's commitment to this project is, I was brought in as Vice President of Multifamily Development. One of my primary tasks really is this project. So, we are committed as a company and very focused on ensuring that this project is a huge success for, the community, all the stakeholders, and everyone to enjoy. And I know we already highlighted some of the background, but just a reminder of, some of the highlights of this project. It's really a 3.5-acre world-class park right in the heart of downtown Bethesda. It's part of the realization of the downtown plan's vision. We're really creating destination program with a combination of active and passive spaces that'll really have multi-generational appeal. We'll go through some of the ideas and concepts that go with that as we go through the presentation. Really a civic green with activated landscape areas where people can congregate, an amphitheater potentially where there could be exciting activities with people gathering again. That's a wonderful thing to see. I've been seeing images of people all over just so eager to be out and about and interacting once again. So it's really great. But also sometimes people, need contemplative gardens and places to be quiet, sit outside, read a book, put your headphones in. And then also we're really creating this nice connection and extension of the Elm Street Park. In addition, it's the rehabilitated and expanded Farm Women's Market, and I'll show some images of that. And really there's so many exciting things to this project, but it's really an environmentally responsible and sustainable project that's going to really showcase these green elements and have one of the region's largest intensive green routes with the undergrounding of the county parking spaces and replacing all of that impervious parking with this large green urban green investment. It'll have some stormwater management enhancements and a lot of really excellent usable spaces. So where have we been? The sketch plan was approved in late 2019, and I don't think I need to tell anybody what happened shortly thereafter, but really the COVID crisis it stalled the plans. It stalled a lot of things. You know, everyone had to look inward and kind of get to the tasks at hand. There was a lot of uncertainty about retail, about office, about urban residential, all of these question marks that, you know, no one knew exactly how we were going to navigate this or get through it. So, and in addition, there was this real challenge to the parking lot district with when people aren't coming downtown, when they're not driving to work, you know, the demand for parking is meaningfully decreased. And interestingly, one of the heroes of all of this really has been parks and outdoor gathering. And some of these retail destinations really emerged as these key public good areas, really where you can have civic engagement, social interaction, recreation. And so we remain thrilled that this is really the framework for this design. So we think it really has this, it's going to be here for, for generations really to enjoy. So it's pretty thrilling to be a part of that.
And Karen, just to that point, I think, we were incredibly excited to be associated with this project and to be part of helping deliver the parks envisioned in the downtown plan, and parks that, many people on this phone call really made possible through their activism and engagement. And that vision, when we were working on this plan together back in 2018 and 2019, was incredibly exciting to us. The idea of being involved with these legacy parks that would forever benefit the community. But as Karen said, I think many of us, and it's too bad we're not in person because we could do a show of hands, but many of us have had outdoor spaces be, one of our key methods of survival through COVID. One of the places that we can meet with friends or family, for those of us with kids, where we can actually let the kids have a little bit of freedom and be kids. And so what parks have meant to all of us over the last year and a half has really emphasized just how critical this type of infrastructure, this type of amenity, this type of civic place is to all of us. And especially if we think of a continued urbanization of Bethesda, which I know is happening, right? It's happening around us every day. Having 3.5 acres of new park is just such an amazing opportunity. And so just our level of enthusiasm for being associated with this and helping make this a reality with you all and with all the stakeholders over the next couple of years is only been strengthened now as we come out of COVID and we think about the future ahead.
Exactly. And so earlier this year, EYA and BDC, DOT, and Parks really reaffirmed our commitment to deliver this project and really begin to work to advance the partnership, to figure out all the details of how it will work. And so we're actively doing that. We've been meeting throughout the summer. And really, upon commitment of financial investment from these key stakeholders, we're committed to moving forward with the community engagement, design, and entitlement process. And so just wanted to go through a little bit of where we are and kind of what these next steps are. So really this key threshold next step is finalizing the terms of how does this deal operate, really getting a memorandum of understanding between the ownership and development team, the Town of Chevy Chase, the Department of Transportation, and Parks. We anticipate being able to complete that in the fourth quarter. So by the end of this year, we hope to have that all ironed out. I'd like to say it's faster, but we do get the fall and early winter bring a lot of holidays, and just being practical, it takes a little bit of time. But the next step in that, and as we get a good handle and start to really feel good about that, would be to really initiate design charrettes and get community input and work with the stakeholders, and namely the members on the folks on this call and your neighbors from the Town of Chevy Chase. And we believe so. The plans that we'll show you are approved sketch plans, and sketch plans are just that. It's more than the back of a napkin. It's gone through a lot of rigorous approvals and meets a lot of standards and things like that. but it's not prescriptive for how you start to color it in and how you start to make the forms take shape. So really what we want to do is engage the community in the charrette process. EYA and BDC, we place a very strong emphasis on participatory, I can never say that word, development. And it's really in our DNA, and we do this on all of our projects and believe that the input and the ideas that we get through these conversations really ultimately lead to just a better project. And we have a lot of experience in leading these charrettes and also working through these complex public-private partnerships. So, you know, just to kind of review what the charrette process really is. So you have kind of a starting point, which is in this case the sketch plan. So, you know, we'll collect information, get some feedback, engage. We'll look to hold, hopefully by the time we're doing this later this year, early next year. My sincere hope is that we can do this all in person. It makes it a better process, but we'll work with what the hand we're dealt. So really engaging with you, the community, and all of the members of Town of Chevy Chase. In those charrette processes, we'll brainstorm, we'll analyze the ideas, and then we're going to take all of those and we're going to incorporate all the feedback that we've heard, and then ultimately implement that into what is the preliminary and final site plan that we submit for the project. So, and this is just a little bit of a reminder of you know, what the sketch illustrative plan and the sketch plan that we have. And again, it's basically creating the areas and the shapes and images that you see are suggested. And so really, again, just to highlight the entire project, this is the existing market, Farm Women's Market. This is where we'll be doing, in addition to that, this is a multifamily mixed use building with some retail on the ground level. And then you get into the market and the addition, and then the awesome public park that we're going to create over the below grade parking for the Department of Transportation. So when we reference lot 24, we're talking about this area right here, and lot 10 is the smaller area over here. So let me just dive in a little bit more. And this is looking at that in plan. All right. So just to orient you, here's Wisconsin Avenue, Leland Street, Willow, 46th Street. So the existing Farm Women's Market is right here. This will be the addition. This is the multifamily building. And then lot 10 is kind of on the southern edge of the site. Lot 24 is the larger area. And then it connects through to Elm Street Park. And then just diving in a little bit more. And again, these are the types of things that we're going to be looking to talk about and really get input on. So this is the lot 24 concept plan. And what's shown here are ideas. So just a vision for what the space could be. You see a pavilion that has an odd shape, and will it end up being that shape? Likely not, but it's just a nod to show the types of things that can go here. It's showing the types of uses. It's showing how the space can be activated, how it can be passive, how it can really just start to take shape and form. And then similarly for lot 10, you know, this again, is there a dog park? Is there not a dog park? That question mark, but it's just showing how these spaces, what fits here. It's giving a sense of scale and just the types of uses. You know, is there a playground here? Is it somewhere else? Is it not a playground? Are there already too many playgrounds? These are all the types of things that'll come out from that charrette process, and we're eagerly looking forward to your input and feedback and thoughts so that we really create this, you know, exciting multi-generational place that, you know, everyone can use and enjoy for a variety of uses.
And Karen, just to add for folks benefit. The Parks Department has an entire team focused on park development. And so we are fully engaged with the Parks Department. I believe there's representative from the Parks Department here on the call tonight, maybe just listening in. But the charrette process will be a joint process where we, as the overall developer planner for the project, will partner with the Parks Department, their development team, and we will partner too with professional landscape architects who will bring in to really help shepherd the design process, help us think about uses, scale, materials, all of those things we will do sort of through a series of these public gatherings or meetings with the experts in the room, with people who can answer the questions, but also with all of us with open ears, hearing from all of you and the other stakeholders in the project about what those important elements are. So just know that the Parks Department will be a huge participant and partner in that parks design process. They are expert in doing that, just as we are in leading the community engagement process. And so we'll all be kind of working together with you in those charrettes that Karen was describing.
Excellent point. Thank you. And then, the other element to this is the Farm Women's Market. And this is an equally important extension of that public space and the public realm and how that really all connects. And that's an equally important part and piece of how we go through the landscape design and really the public spaces and how this all interacts and works together.
So if park spaces were one of the heroes of the last 18 months, I'd say outdoor dining was one of the heroes of the last 12 months. And certainly having more outdoor dining options, more places where you can sit and have a cup of coffee, have a drink, have dinner outside, being social, that is really the vision of what that rehabilitated Farm Women's Market will be like. And it really will serve as a sort of a beacon that activates the entirety of the park and becomes, a place where you can go in between using the park or taking part in an activity like a yoga in the park or something like that.
Exactly. And really this vision, and this is not to be too redundant, but really what we're looking to do is bring these places to life. And I'm not going to read the whole slide, but it's adding all of these interesting uses, food, beverage, public realm, public spaces, really creating these opportunities to congregate, socialize, spend some time by yourself outside, be together but apart, all of these things that really can make these places special, lasting, and just really places that you want to continue to go and use and share. And what this really shows is that concept, again, a framework for things that we'll talk about and how we'll discuss these spaces. So, you have social areas, you have active spaces, contemplative spaces. And this is, driving from, you have the Farm Women's Market, which is a social space, which will kind of, I think, transition nicely into the center part of lot 24, and then have some activity around that, and then have kind of some bookends with more contemplative spaces. And again, this is how we see it. Now it's possible that when we go through this process, this might be backwards. Remains to be seen. Although I'm pretty, I do think the Farm Women's Market will continue to be social and active, and but again, this is a framework for how we can start to think about these spaces. And we wanted to introduce or reintroduce, I know some of you have seen these images already, but reintroduce these as ideas and driving concepts behind all of this. So again, as McLean said, the food hall, a true, especially with outside area, true, place where you can just gather and enjoy. And I think the Farm Women's Market and the addition really lends itself amazingly to having just a really world-class, exciting place for to create this type of space. Parks. So another function is social gathering. So for instance, I think this Thursday evening there's the Yappy Hour. That type of event that can really happen. See your neighbors, a place to come, a place to just interact and again, be social. And I hope everyone with dogs is going to attend on Thursday. I've heard that they're pretty fantastic events. I don't have a dog, but you know, the other thing is parks, you know, have active functions. So again, I think what this image is really showing is the appeal to this, you know, wide range of activities, a wide range, you know, multi-generational, everything from places for kids to places for yoga. You know, I think we have some more pictures. You know, I don't know if we live in a climate where an ice skating rink makes a ton of sense, but just things that create these interesting places where, you know, you can go be active with your neighbors, by yourself, with your friends and family. Disposition, you know, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, the contemplative spaces, you know, places to sit, to be quiet by yourself or with a few people, be a little quieter, but still be out in a really lovely setting, and to still be, you know, a sense of something else and something bigger. You know, you're not just sitting in your backyard. You want to be out with other people, see interesting place, see, you know, unique design features. Just a really special place to go and, you know, like I said, just be a little quiet. These are some more images. And then really what we get into is, sorry, I'm having trouble with my page down. Some of the construction phasing and how is this all going to happen? So really, we've broken it up into 2 phases. What that allows us to do is build phase 1, where we build replacement parking, the new park on lot 24, the Farm Women's Market restoration and expansion, and the civic plaza that goes along with that. While that's under construction, the parking that is on lot 10 will remain in use. So still all those spaces in addition to other spaces nearby, but that doesn't take everything offline at one time. So it really creates a nice phasing. And, you know, upon completion of the phase 1, when folks can start parking in there, then we would envision starting phase 2, which is lot 10, which is essentially building the lot 10 park out.
I think Karen's going to show the schedule here in a second, but one thing to note, when you're building a big below grade parking garage, having to come back out of the ground, build the park on top of that, that's a much longer duration to build lot 24 than it is to build lot 10. Lot 10 is surface improvements where there's an existing, it's basically the conversion of an existing parking lot to a park. And that is a much faster construction cycle that you would see on lot 10 than you would see on lot 24.
Exactly. Great point. So going back to where we're going after we get through the our kind of memorandum of understanding and our charrette process, is we'd be looking to submit our preliminary and site plan in the second quarter, hopefully the earlier part of the second quarter 2022. You know, that would allow us to start phase 1 of that construction, which is over the lot 24 in the third quarter of 2023. We would envision that all of that work, the garage, the undergrounding of the garage, the Farm Women's Market, and the above at the at-grade park completed by the fourth quarter of 2025, which is the same time that the residential building would deliver. And then we would start phase 2, which is the lot 10 park construction in the fourth quarter of 2025, once that residential building reaches occupancy. And really that is our update. I know we're gonna wait till the end to take questions, I believe. So I will stop sharing my screen right now. So.
Thank you so much, Karen and McLean, for the presentation. It's very helpful, and I figure some questions are coming in, but we'll wait to hear from Chris first and go from there. So, Chris, do you have any slides to share, or would
we
you
do?
Okay.
Jeremy has the slides, and he's actually going to do most of the speaking on this tonight.
Okay.
Jeremy Souders is the county's project manager for this and is the one who's responsible for working with the representatives from the town park and planning. I guess I'm not on camera. I got to turn that on too, don't I? The Parks Department and our internal stakeholders to move this forward. So what we're sharing with you is not as compelling, I'll have to admit up front, as the slides that McLean and his partners have been through, because our role is kind of in the nuts and bolts and administration of making this happen. And the mayor and Irene, council member, asked us to give you a little sense for what this actually looks like from a process point of view for the county. I'll start by saying that the county is enthusiastic, as we have been, in making this project occur. It's one of the major cornerstones of the Bethesda downtown plan, and is certainly key to realizing that vision that everybody's been excited about. You mentioned early on that the parking lot district is a separate legal entity, and that's the case, and you'll see that throughout these slides. So there's roles that we have, both representing the parking lot district, which is the owner of those two lots, and roles that we have as representatives of the county and the Department of Transportation in trying to make this project come together as a whole. So it's somewhat complicated, but ultimately all of this information would get distilled into a general development agreement with Bernstein Management Company and EYA that would also reflect the roles of the Parks Department, Town of Chevy Chase, and any other agencies that are participating in that. So with that, I'll let Jeremy kind of walk through the details of what we're at least thinking this deal to make these parks and parking garage and private development happen would look like.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm Jeremy Souders. I'm the Chief of Management Services for MC2 Parking. I handle a lot of the property development in the parking lot districts, oversee the projects for development on the PLD properties. So what you're seeing here right now is a very high level, simplistic view of the project transaction structure. One of the elements of it is a purchase and sale agreement for lot 10 and 24. So again, the simplistic view is the parking lot districts would sell lot 24 to the Bernstein EYA development. A component of that also is the parking lot district selling lot 10 to the county. Park and planning, Town of Chevy Chase will contribute funding to to complete the project. Lot 24 and lot 10 parks will be deeded back to the county and managed ultimately by park and planning. That will happen after actually substantial completion. Bernstein EYA will obtain financing, obtain development approvals, have an agreement with park and planning and Chevy Chase, and will ultimately develop the parks that are acceptable to park and planning. The second component of it, which will ultimately happen after substantial completion, is the purchase and sale agreement for turnkey public parking garage and surface lot. So what will ultimately come of this is 3 or 4 separate condominium units. One unit being the underground public parking garage, the other being the surface of street level, the surface of that parking garage, which will ultimately become the public park that's on top of the public parking garage. Lot 10 and the private improvements that will occur on the EYA Bernstein side. The next slide, we get into project elements on the county side. So we have a range of cost elements that we see. One of the biggest elements on our side is obviously the 200 space public parking garage. And we included a range here because it's still an evolution and discussion, and they're kind of just placeholders at this point. The $13 million to $16 million costs are costs that are obviously depending on the size of the garage and ultimately the cost per space to build those spaces underground. And we're working through that process right now with the development team to pin down those exact costs so we can get a harder number there. Obviously, another big component of that is the park construction. Again, we have a $4.5 million placeholder there. As those elements are designed, obviously that price will be refined in more detail. Those elements add up to the total project cost of 17.5 million to 20.5 million. Anticipated contribution factor or sources, obviously the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, PLD, Park and Planning Commission, Town of Chevy Chase, Montgomery County, and the developer. So the parking demand study, one of the big elements, as I'd said in the previous slide, was the biggest cost is replacement of parking. We have Kimberly Horn, which is a nationwide parking consultant, under contract to perform a parking needs assessment study. So part of their scope that's going to be included in their study, what they're going to be looking at is existing and projected future parking demand. So that obviously includes the pre-COVID versus the post-COVID parking demand. It looks at future development pipeline projects. So those are projects that are in site plan, pre-site plan. They usually look out about 5 years. So any development that's in the pipeline in the next 5 years around this development project will be looked at in terms of what their parking demand projections will be. And then what I talked about is the post-COVID parking demand, which is the big unknown, right? Because before we had a good handle on what our parking demands were leading up to COVID. And then COVID hit, and I don't think anybody knows what the new norm is going to be with people returning to work or people having some element of telework going forward in the future. So we'll lean on our parking consultant heavily to kind of inform us of what that new norm is moving forward. So in terms of timing on that, we're waiting for the purchase order at this time. So we're hoping to get data. It's approximately 60-day study. And again, they'll be looking at the public on our side, which is the lot 24 and 10, as well as surrounding in the area that you see on that aerial photograph to the right of the slide. So currently in our inventory, in terms of the parking lot district's management, we have lot 24, which the surface lot currently has 216 public parking spaces, and lot 10, which has 96 public parking spaces. So a total of that is 312 public parking spaces that are currently in operation. Lot 31, which is right across Wisconsin Avenue to the west of Wisconsin Avenue, is a very large underground parking garage at 384 spaces. Parking consultant will be looking at that as a resource of parking as well. And they'll also be looking at the private parking available in the area. And to give everybody an idea is, parking has obviously been hit very hard during the pandemic. We're operating right now at about 50% capacity for these numbers that we're looking at right here on our parking inventory. Pre-COVID, even at peak demand times, the Garage 31, the Capitol Crescent Garage, was still operating at 200 to 300 public parking spaces that were available at any given time. So there is excess inventory in the surrounding area. But the real component that we don't know is that post-COVID parking demand, and ultimately will inform us of how many parking spaces that we're going to need to replace those 312 spaces that are ultimately going to be developed as part of this project. Timeline. This is on the county side on the timeline, and part of it what we're working to is a purchase and sale agreement, or the GDA, which ultimately is what we're leading to. That will inform the deal structure for it moving forward. Simultaneously with that GDA will be the land disposition process. So anytime the county disposes of any county property, there's a county code, which is there. It's 11B.45-01. I put 6 months. I hope it doesn't take that long, but sometimes it does. But those will simultaneously work with us signing the developer agreement. And the land disposition process is a public process. It goes through Office of Management Budget, Council. It also has public input on the reuse analysis of any public property that's ultimately being sold for private use. Land transfer from county to Bernstein EYA. We already talked about this in more detail, but construction beginning on lot 24 site, construction beginning on lot 10, substantial completion, and the county units transferring to the county. That's all we have on our side. So I'm not sure if there's any other presentation after this, or
diving right into questions.
Okay, thanks. There is a question about the integration of Elm Street Park, whether there will be a renovation of that park, how it will be integrated into the parks on lot 10 and 24, and what might happen with that, what's anticipated or contemplated with the renovation of Elm Street Park, and how it's integrated into lots 10 and 24 parks.
Well, I'll take that one quickly, and obviously anyone else can chime in. But the lot 20, the Elm Street Park existing is, as all of you probably know, graced by beautiful big trees on the vast majority of its footprint, and is largely a more passive and contemplative park. It can accommodate the yappy hour, as it will on Thursday. It can accommodate, picnics, small gatherings. But what we've envisioned is really thinking about how do we supplement that existing Elm Street Park with the additional 3.5 acres of civic and park space. So thinking that would stay largely for its existing purpose, but be very intentionally linked and part of the overall park concept that would stretch from lot 10 through lot 24 up to Elm Street Park, and then ultimately, to the Purple Line and to the connection for the Capitol Crescent Trail. So yes, it's been thought about a lot as an integral part of that park network, but as far as wholesale changes to Elm Street Park, that hasn't been contemplated. I think the vision that all of the key stakeholders and community groups that we spoke to had for the new parks were that they were really adding on to, supplementing, and providing different amenities than what existed at the current Elm Street Park.
Great, thanks. Can you speak to the environmental features of the redevelopment? LEED certified, green roofs, stormwater management, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, we are, again, very early in that process, but I think, as Karen indicated, the greening of this urban infrastructure is a huge design impetus for what we're doing here. And so the idea of taking the impervious surface area, which largely, if you think of all of the properties, the Farm Women's Market, 7121, and obviously the two parking lots, the vast majority of them are impervious today. So they don't allow the rainwater, say, to seep into the ground. They don't allow it to be treated naturally. They just sort of, it drains off of the hard surfaces. So the vision here would be to have a sustainable, and I'm going to imagine LEED certified everything, although there are several other green rating programs now that sometimes are used in addition to LEED. But in addition to that certification process, we would envision significant on-site stormwater retention and treatment happening for the building, for the impervious surfaces that would go back onto the site. And then for the entirety of the Lot 24 park, or the vast majority of it, you actually, that would actually technically be sort of a green roof. The civic lawn, the amphitheater, many of those features would actually be built on below grade parking. So those would be green features in and of themselves. Lot 10, which has nothing below it but for park, has the opportunity to really dramatically improve the water conditions for that parcel, which again is a surface parking lot today. So you could think of all of that water being able to be treated and captured, then treated on lot 10, and lot 10 becoming a pervious, being returned to a pervious state. So green features will be a key part of this design. What additional features and green components of the project come along, I think will be an important part of our design process and the charrette process. And I will say that, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, we did get our LEED Silver certificate for the Lindley, which was a public-private partnership we developed in Chevy Chase, just off Lake, just off Connecticut Avenue, that had a similar park over parking structure. And we just got our LEED Silver certs last week. So.
Great, thanks. Next question is, can you speak to the mixed use nature of the development, residential and commercial? I believe the residential, could you speak to whether they're all condominiums and what kind of retailers you're attracting or how much retail space you're envisioning? And speak also to the retention of the merchants of the Farm Women's Market.
Sure. So I'll hit the first one, and Chuck, if you want to talk a little bit about the status of the farm women's market today, that'd be great. But the vision for the mix of uses is that the residential component of the project would be rental as opposed to for sale. So it would be a rental apartment building. And on the ground floor of the apartment building, facing the farm women's market and facing out on Wisconsin Avenue, there would be retail on the ground floor of that building. While the final design isn't obviously even started yet, in the sketch plan process, I think we had about 18,000 square feet of retail in that ground floor. In the farm women's market and its expansion, you could accommodate up to about another 12 or 14,000 square feet of total commercial or retail space. So you put the up to 14 with the 18, you're at about 32,000 square feet of potential ground floor retail, really activating that civic plaza. And as far as types of tenants, retailers, merchants, we are very early on in that process still, but we would envision significant amount of market use, food use, potentially food hall use, which we think could be incredibly exciting. Soft goods retailing, selling of clothing, selling of furniture, selling of goods, that is a very hard business these days. Selling of experiences, one-off goods, restaurants, local products, that is a more thriving component of the retail environment right now. And so we'd envision more of that.
Thanks. Can you speak to, or can give us some sense of the parking that will be created versus the new parking that will be needed from the new residential units? In other words, will all the new parking be consumed by the new parking? What ratio is there of the use of the parking spaces by those who rent the condominiums versus those who visit amenities or shop or visit the park?
So that's a great point of clarification. I don't think we were clear about that. The parking that we've been talking about is the replacement DOT parking that really is intended to provide the public parking for that the existing parking serves today. The residential building would have its own parking. So we haven't finalized what a parking ratio there would be, but I would guess probably somewhere in the 0.7 spaces per residential unit of residential parking would be provided on top of the new DOT parking that would be built. So in addition to the DOT parking, you would have residential parking.
Thanks. Can you speak to an issue of both during construction and post-construction vehicular access to the town, how it might be impacted by the development and redevelopment of the lots, and what it might mean for town residents who are trying to access their homes, and other ways to prevent cut-through traffic during road closures and the such?
So we're a little early to have a concrete plan for site logistics at this point, but that is something that we would study really, really carefully. And so the things that we've thought about starting at the highest level are the idea of retaining lot 10 so that it can function as a parking resource for the community while lot 24 is being redeveloped. So obviously access to lot 10 would need to be maintained for that to work. And similarly, there aren't tremendous improvements or reconfigurations planned on 46th Street that would largely remain intact, with really streetscape enhancements taking place on the west side of the existing street. So our hope would be, obviously to minimize the impact that we will have on circulation, on commutes. That said, we know that construction projects are by their very nature disruptive, that things like loading in material deliveries can be challenging. And I will also say that despite our best efforts, we also know that sometimes the truck driver doesn't get the memo from his boss that he can't drive up this street, and so we take those things very seriously. We will have staff tasked with things like maintenance of traffic and enforcing our plans and site logistics. But at this point, our goal will be to design something with minimal impact. But I can't say no impact. We just don't know exactly yet how all that would work.
You may have answered this question. Any plans to include active indoor social spaces, theaters, clubs, event spaces?
So it's a great question. I think that we do view the farm women's market as potentially being able to serve that type of function. So, a food hall, if you will, can really have flexible spaces in it, spaces that can accommodate different types of events. One of our, I think, guiding principles has been about how to make that space as porous as possible so that it is activating the civic plaza and also spilling out onto the park and activating the park so that you have this sort of continuous indoor-outdoor space and the ability to program events. We don't have any plans for things like a concert venue or a theater or anything like that. I mean, at this point, we've really envisioned, sort of the food hall use, existing supplemental uses like that. But certainly, as the plans develop, we will keep everyone up to speed.
Thanks. The buildings along Wisconsin Avenue, the proposed buildings, and the noise levels they may create due to reflective noise. Have you thought about how to minimize the impact of that for the new buildings on the community?
So as part of all of our projects, we do hire noise and vibration consultants to help us study the impact of the development on both the surrounding community and the surrounding community on the development. Some of the things that folks may be thinking about are loading and the impact of loading trucks, things like that may have impacts that might spread out through the community. And then I'm potentially questions about whether the noise might have some sort of, the building might somehow send noise from Wisconsin Avenue further back into the community, which I don't think we've seen anything from our consultants that suggests that might be a factor. But certainly designing to mitigate the impact of the active uses of retail, of the loading that comes with retail, those will be important to obviously maintaining a great relationship with the community, but also to maintaining happy tenants in our building right upstairs. And so obviously a very important factor that we will think about.
Can you speak to the redevelopment of the farm and women's markets, the actual facility itself, and again to what kind of vision you see for the redevelopment of that facility and the retention of the vendors there?
So the farm women's market property and the building specifically fall under the purview of the county's Historic Preservation Commission, which is a body of appointed commissioners who have a process that they go through for actually approving all the work that takes place on the historic property. And so we have gone through several initial conversations and hearings with the Historic Preservation Commission in helping think about what a future for the farm women's market looks like. For those of you who may have been carefully involved in the process several years ago when we started, there were questions about whether we would put below grade parking underneath the farm women's market, whether we would move or reconfigure the farm women's market, and then whether an addition and what type of addition might be most appropriate. Those were all different topics that the Historic Preservation Commission heavily weighed in on, guided, and ultimately is a governing body that must be navigated through for any of those approvals to take place. And their vision was very clear and helped us refine ours. So we don't have parking beneath the farm women's market. As part of rebuilding the foundation for the farm women's market, which is failing, we have envisioned a short 10-foot move of that historic structure, just planned north, keeping its east-west orientation to Wisconsin Avenue and its distance from Wisconsin Avenue. And we presented a variety of potential concepts for an addition to the back of the Farm Women's Market to the Historic Preservation Commission, looking for their guidance on what that form, shape, scale might be. All of that we did through the guidance of our own historic preservation consultant and our own historic preservation architecture firm, who are expert in rehabilitating structures, thinking about compatibility, working through the HPC process. And so we've done all of that. I think there are certain components that will be really critical to the HPC as far as how the exterior of the building is treated. But as far as how the interior is treated, we really do envision trying to maintain an open structure inside the Farm Women's Market, really trying to maintain an open, airy structure within the addition of the Farm Women's Market, and really trying to have that feel and maintain that market sensibility.
What is the building footprint for the building compared to the footprint for the proposed parks?
That's a great technical question. I don't tell you, I don't have an answer to that right now. I will tell you that in total, it is approximately 3.5 acres of park space between lot 10, lot 24, and the civic spaces surrounding the Farm Women's Market. That I think greatly exceeds the amount of the footprint of the residential building and the amount of the Farm Women's Market and its addition. I just can't tell you an exact number now, but that's certainly something, Todd, that we can follow up with.
Sure, thanks. I think that really concludes most of the questions. I've consolidated most of them and I've worked through, hopefully have touched on most of the themes here. And I believe that will conclude my question.
Todd, if I could, I have a question I'd like to ask. I know, Dean, you alluded at the beginning to the hope that we had as a town that the Bethesda parking lot district could potentially float bonds. And Chris, in our recent conversations, you said that would be difficult. Could you please talk a bit more about that? What's happened that's caused the change there in perspective, and what's going on with the financial situation of the parking lot district?
Sure, happy to talk about that. As we were entering into the pandemic, we had a relatively robust program in place to repair a lot of deferred maintenance activities that were present in the Bethesda PLD. One of them you may be seeing now, which is the redecking of the Waverly Garage, which got underway just before the pandemic started. There were lots of other needs beyond that that were finding their way into that 6-year program. But over the last year, as people have alluded to, the parking activity in the PLDs, all 3 of them that the county manages, Wheaton, Silver Spring, and Bethesda, was dramatically reduced, made major impacts to revenues. And all of these are independently functioning enterprise funds where the money generated in the PLDs supports the operation of the parking lot district, the urban district, which in this case is Bethesda Urban Partnership, and funds the capital program of those parking lot districts. Fortunately for the county, there was no debt in 2 of the parking lot districts, in the Silver Spring parking lot district and the Wheaton parking lot district. And through service adjustments, reducing some enforcement activities, reducing cleaning activities, deferring non-essential maintenance activities, the Silver Spring and Wheaton parking lot districts were able to maintain their balance sheet and they also had generated significant reserves and had rate increases more recently. They were able to preserve a balance sheet through the pandemic. That was not the case in Bethesda, where there are outstanding debt obligations and there's a higher level of parking structures compared to the overall inventory than other places that have more intensive needs. So the county did have to come in and compensate the parking lot district so that the parking lot district could meet the bond obligations for the current debt. That's not to say that will be the case forever, that there would never be the capacity to do something that way, but it has set back the ability to pay off those debts, and as part of the strategy to keep the parking lot district in the fund, many other critical maintenance activities, some of which are as expensive as this proposed project, have been deferred, and those need attention. So it seemed much less likely, given the revenue uncertainties that we had, the impacts to meeting the obligations of the current debt and kind of piling up of other demands to call on that recovery of revenue, that debt financing through the parking lot district would make a lot of sense at this time. So we had conversations with the county executive's office about, well, how do we continue to move this project forward? And that's where the ideas that Jeremy talked about in his slides about the county acquiring from the parking lot district, one of the parking lots, and some participation in the other to fill a revenue gap that in this project that we've been thinking of at that time. And until we kind of get a little bit further down the road with McLean and his team on better certainty on cost elements for this project, we won't know that total gap, but we anticipate that gap is still there. So the county's direct contribution isn't completely defined at this time. It's kind of waiting for the pieces of the puzzle to come into better focus here. But I hope that gives some answer to that question, Barney.
That is helpful. And I think you might also, something that's valuable, I think, for the residents to appreciate is that we really have two different, I think perhaps you can help me out here, but two different dates. We've got a date that sometime this winter or spring when financial commitments need to be made in order that the work can proceed and the developers can carry the costs of the permitting and all the design work, knowing that a financial plan is there. And then there is a subsequent date, which could stretch out, but in the case of buying the garage, might not be till 2025, when the actual cash has to be on hand. And that obviously the county can make the commitment anyway as itself. How it ultimately fulfills that commitment, could ultimately be a variety of different sources. But the key is that initial commitment. And what you're asking for is that the town also join in making a commitment as well and follow through to help cover the gap in financing.
Yeah, and we would expect the same kind of level of scrutiny from the town's perspective, and the same understanding that there's some float in these numbers until there's a actual bid to build the project. But to have an expectation of that order of magnitude from all the people participating, or all the entities participating, is where we want to get to by the close of this year. And obviously, as you mentioned, the town's participation in that is key, as is the Parks Department. All of us need to work together to make this happen, because we can all find reasons to make it challenging. But a commitment to get the project done is kind of where we are now, and are hoping that all the other participants in this feel the same way and come to the same conclusion.
I'll ask two additional questions. Impacts to adjacent town streets, loading docks for the redevelopment, similar types of impacts that you might envision for town streets adjacent to the redevelopment.
Aaron, is it possible for you to share your screen on one of those site plans? So the short answer is that there are, this is perfect. There are planned garage entrances from both Willow Lane and from Leland into the below grade parking structure on lot 24. So the public parking and the residential parking would be accessible from both Leland and from Willow. There would be no parking garage access, no loading from 46th Street. And really, the lot 10 in its entirety would be redeveloped as park, and so wouldn't have any intensive requirements in that way. Right now, the loading for the building is contemplated taking place off of Leland Street, adjacent to the garage entrance. So really kind of concealed within the footprint of the building, and relying on that entrance there as well. So that's right now how the project's envisioned, and I would be very surprised if there would be any material deviation from that. I think that those two access points were something that we thought a lot about in the design process collectively, and something that the planning board opined on during their sketch plan review process. And obviously, again, our goal would be to fully respect and minimize the impacts that this project would have on the existing street network within the town of Chevy Chase and the traffic restrictions that may be in place in the town.
Thanks. And the last question, are there any plans perhaps to partner with locally headquartered corporations, Marriott, et cetera, whose employees will become community members and whose corporate social responsibility programs and sustainability goals can be enhanced by participation in creation of this community green space? Perhaps it could be explored as a way to bridge the gap in funding.
So I think that is certainly a very interesting idea. It is a model that has been used in other parts of the country where large corporate stakeholders, foundations, other members of the community at large are engaged in basically fundraising for the purpose of supporting new community infrastructure. Certainly something that I think would be conceivable that we would explore. I will say, the hospitality industry is probably not one that would be in a position to do much at this point in time. And I would say that, a lot of our businesses in the Bethesda region, aren't necessarily all the businesses that have been booming as much as some other sectors of the economy have. But certainly that would be something that we would explore.
Thank you. I'm finished my questions, the consolidation of questions from residents.
And Todd, I should say, if you'd like it to be named the Hoffman, Legacy Park, perhaps, the Parks Department and DOT and anyway, and Bernstein would love a conversation.
We'll consider that. Sure. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, if that's the end of all the questions in the presentations, I'll just offer a few closing comments. Thank you all for participating tonight, and thank you, Deedon and Irene, for your introductions. And to you, McLean, Karen, and Chris, for your presentations and taking the questions from our residents. And for Jeremy as well for your presentation. We in the council hope this event has been successful in reminding all of us of this project, of both its potential and its challenges. The council will take up the county's request that the town consider financially supporting this project at our next council meeting on October 13th. That will be a time for discussion and exploring views, preliminary views. There will be a further process when we will request more resident input before any decision is taken. However, we ask all of you to please help us by submitting your initial views in advance of the October 13th council meeting. We want to hear from you, as many of you as possible. And you can also take advantage of 2 listening sessions that my colleague Ellen Cornelius Erickson will be hosting on September 27th and on October 12th. There are many issues to consider as we should seek to answer the following key questions. Should we support this project? And if so, how much financial support should we provide? The county has not asked us for a specific amount, but from the financial framework that we've heard this evening, it's fair to conclude that a material contribution could be some millions of dollars. So let me share with you the issues that we'll be considering as we seek to answer these questions. We hope that this review will be helpful to you as you consider your views that we hope to hear. First, the value proposition for us. What are these parks and an expanded farm women's market worth to us? There is the green space in itself. This would be an active park with many amenities for our residents to enjoy. A charrette process must be undertaken. The ideas for amenities are many: an amphitheater for performances, a playground, a dog park, water feature, picnicking, an area devoted to nature. All of these are amenities that our town residents would be able to enjoy. The food shopping within a large farm women's market and dining, revitalization of retail trade along Wisconsin Avenue. And as Deedon pointed out at the outset, there is essentially the avoided risk. If this land is developed as parks, then it will never become high-rise buildings very close to our town. We'll have a rich, wide green space between ourselves and Bethesda. The second question, the second issue that we'll be exploring when we think about the amount is the opportunity cost. The town currently has over $10 million in unencumbered reserves and is receiving approximately $2.4 million in ARPA funds, some of which may be available to support the green infrastructure components of this park creation. How much of these sums might we be willing to commit to this project, recognizing that there are other projects that we may also wish to fund? And what is the right amount that we truly need for a rainy day reserve, an amount that we will not commit to any project? Third question, which we have to think through, is a matter of urgency. In comparing this project to others, we should ask not only what is important, but what is important and also urgent. Is now the time for this project? Do we believe that if we don't secure a financial plan this winter, we could possibly lose an opportunity and not get it back? Then there's the question of just what is necessary to actually get a deal done. What do we need to commit to for a viable financing plan to be assured? We genuinely appreciate the support that we've heard from Chris Conklin tonight of the Department of Transportation and from Mark Elrich as our county executive. But we also know that there are competing priorities for county funds. We know of continued pressures caused by the pandemic. We know that there is resistance by many in the county to spending for amenities in our area, which is clearly the most affluent part of the entire county. We know that the call for the creation of these parks, stated so clearly in the Bethesda downtown plan, did not arise from the planning department nor from the planning board. It arose from us, as Deedon made clear, from the town and surrounding communities. We collected the 6,000 signatures and gained the support of the county council for this vision. So if we want this project, what level of leadership is called for from us now to ensure that this vision becomes reality? And then there's something that I'll call a broader civic outlook. We do know that a large amount of our reserve arises from two actions. First, frankly, it was a mistake made by the state. The town, along with many other municipalities across Maryland, was over reimbursed for income tax receipts for several years. And then second, there was a subsequent state law that forgave all of these municipalities from any obligation to repay the extra funds received. Regarding the ARPA money, many residents have made the point that an affluent community such as ours does not need the money, and that we should find ways to direct it to help others, not just ourselves. So how might the source of funds that the town has received influence our decision as to how to spend these monies? This project will benefit all the residents of Bethesda and all the surrounding communities, and all who work in Bethesda from all walks of life. These benefits will be appreciated now and for future generations, to whom this expansive green may well become even more valuable as the Bethesda skyline reaches higher and higher. Can we therefore consider this project a commitment to the broader public good beyond our town? And if so, is supporting this project an appropriate way to use funds that have come to us not from taxes we have paid, but from the good fortune that has augmented our reserves? Finally, in considering the prospect of supporting the project, there is one other matter to be deliberated: conditions. What conditions might we attach to our contribution to ensure we receive the value we pay for and that this value endures? Some are obvious. We should not contribute unless and until a complete financial plan is in place that assures the financing of the entire project, both the work on lot 24 and the creation of the park on lot 10. There must also be an active charrette process that takes our views of amenities into account, as was certainly indicated by McLean and Karen. And then what ongoing involvement with the park oversight might be warranted by us. And there are other questions as well, or other conditions as well that we may consider. So this is a lot to review for sure. Value, opportunity cost, urgency, the amount necessary for a deal, our civic outlook, and various conditions. However, we council members take this engagement with you, our residents, very seriously. And as you think about what you may wish to say, we want you to be aware of the different aspects of this decision that the council itself will be deliberating. We look forward to hearing from you. We take up our review of this, as we take up our review of this potentially transformative project at the edge of our town. So with that, thank you very much. And I think Irene or Dean, is there anything else that you wish to say, or we otherwise can close our meeting?
Arnie, I'll just add that we'll be happy to circulate this presentation. I believe that we've provided it to the town already, and we'll make sure that it is made available to the folks who participated in this call or more broadly within the town as well.
That'd be very
Yes.
good. We'll probably want to send around a town crier that'll include that, perhaps some of our comments tonight. If Chris and Jeremy, you can make your presentation available to us as well, that would be helpful.
Right. And we'll also be listing the upcoming listening sessions that Councilmember Erickson will be hosting. So
Right. Very good.
thanks so much. I do not have any closing comments other than to thank everyone for a very informative presentation. Appreciate it.
Good.